People of the world, welcome to Send It Rising Live, episode 356. You may have seen him on the show before. You may have heard him on the show before. Our guest today sent me a letter. Sent me a letter with a lot of like XOXOs and hearts. I'm kidding. He sent me a letter that was about mergers and acquisitions. He was interested in potentially purchasing the company, and I thought that was so interesting. I had to reach out to him. Because his strategy for growing his business deals with numbers. It deals with talking to digital marketing agencies. Maybe they want out. Maybe you're 56 and you're like, I'm kind of done with this and I got enough money to retire. Or maybe things aren't going so well and revenue is not heading in the right direction and you're thinking maybe jumping ship makes sense. I just thought it was fascinating. And in the letter, he mentioned, he's like, hey, I'm not some huge hedge fund or anything. Like I'm just, a digital marketing owner. And here we go. So we had a great interview. You can go back, listen to that one, but you don't have to, because today what we're going to do is we're going to start the journey into our guest's life from the beginning. What does it take to get to where he has been? Can you relate? Hopefully you can. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor to welcome back to the show the one and only Link Moser.
Thank you. Happy to be here again. It was a lot of fun last time, and now the bar is set, so we're that much more fun this time.
Away we go. What are the requirements? I always email Link and I say, please wear flannel. And he says, not a problem. I got you covered.
Yeah, I've got nothing else. Yeah, always the flannel. At least this time of year. I mean, it's cold here in New England, so.
Yeah, we were talking about how comfort should trump almost everything, especially in the pandemic. And I think Link and I are on the same page. I am wearing a coat. So we're good. All right. So we talked before and you had like horses running around your backyard. And so if I had to guess, I would say you weren't born in Manhattan.
That's correct. I was born right here in New Hampshire, in the capital city of Concord, on a snowy Monday back in the mid 70s. And I haven't strayed far. I mean, I've grown up in this general area and lived here most of my whole life. So it's been home. About an hour and a half north of Boston. For anyone that wants a frame of reference, if New Hampshire still sounds like a city somewhere, it's yes, it's cold up here at times. Although global warming is shifting that for better or for worse. It's about 50 degrees out now and almost t-shirt weather by our standards. So yeah, it's pretty nice. So yeah, I grew up here. My parents were my mother's from outside of Boston. My dad was from the Midwest in western Kansas. So kind of polar opposites, but they met in the early 70s. My dad was in the Air Force, so back east, and they moved to New Hampshire and had me. I'm the oldest of four, and it was the 70s, mid 70s, and we moved to the town that I live in now in 1981, somewhere around there, and the house that I grew up in from 81 on is right over there, right across the way. So I actually live next door to the house I grew up in. My parents moved here on an old log cabin with 40 acres of land because they wanted to start a dairy farm. Or I should say my mother did. I'm not sure my father wanted to do that, but he was a good sport. And so that place where those horses were running around that we talked from last time, that is my old family farm that is now owned by other people, not related, but they have horses there. So it's been, in the barn that my father built for cattle. And so my brother and I grew up, not being able to get a soda pop anywhere. I mean, you could ride your bike, but there was nowhere to go. So until you had a driver's license, you really were at home, and no internet back then. We didn't have cable TV. You couldn't get a pizza delivered. In fact, you still can't get a pizza delivered out here, which is probably not a bad thing for one's waistline, right? Mm-hmm. So we made our fun in other ways. I had probably alluded to this when we first spoke. I've always had an interest in technology, which, depending on what time period you are, technology means different things. I remember a family friend who worked for IBM showing me this video game called King's Quest.
I love me some King's Quest.
Yeah, King's Quest. Didn't know if you'd know that one. That was a game that was designed to show off the graphics for the PC Junior in the early 80s. And this guy worked for IBM, so my guess is he got his hands on one of these pretty quickly. And my brother and I, we weren't even 10 years old, and we thought this thing is the bomb. I mean, this is what compared to games like Pong, where it was just, that game was full 16 color. You could type things in, give the goat a carrot. So I got interested in computers pretty early on. We had a Commodore computer for much of the 80s. So I met one of my good friends who I'm still friends with now at a users group for Commodore computers, and we would perhaps borrow each other's games in a way that might not be standard with licensing of the time. But that was something that we came across. We'd stay inside from recess and putt around with the one computer sitting back in the corner of the classroom the teachers had no idea what to do with. And you put a little bit of BASIC in there, and then once every kid came back in, the teacher started, it would start beeping, and the teacher had no idea how to turn that thing off. And so we were the geeks, I guess. So my interest in technology never faded from that. I did, I got my fresh air outside, and my brother and I ran around on motorized equipment like dirt bikes and four-wheelers because we had a lot of land and trails. And so, between those two, rainy days, you're behind the computer, outside, you're out ripping it up in the woods. I mean, what else do you need? That was my childhood. And, I was good at school, got good grades. So it was just as easy to get an A as it was to get an F for me. So I might as well just, put the right answer in. I thought I was going to go to college, have every intent of going off to college. That's what you did, right? At least that's what was, my parents went to college. So I'm led to believe that's just what you do. And I did not have that opportunity. My family's financial situation was such that my mother decided to take all of us to Bermuda and then a cruise to the Caribbean during my senior year in high school. So, when they said, we don't have any money to put this deposit down, well, okay, I thought you said you covered it. So those family trips might have been part of that, I guess. And little did I know that. And I took off the proverbial year, right? All right, I'll take a year off. That's fine. I applied to the University of New Hampshire and put it on deferment. I'll take a year off because I was a pretty shy kid, not really used to going other places. And so the idea of going off to college was a little scary. I didn't do camp, or I was pretty sheltered. So I wasn't exactly jumping up and down to do that. It was kind of cozy in the nest. And I, took that year off, and I was always of a entrepreneurial spirit, I think. I probably said this early on. My first and only job was when I was 12, working at a landscape nursery down the road, watering trees and planting trees and doing really menial tasks. And that lasted 3 months. And I did not like working for the man. It was so boring. So I think after that, I whether that was the cause or whether it was just in me, after the dairy farm, that didn't work out. My parents started selling, landscape trees and things on the farm. So there were some little, half-assed attempt home businesses that I thought, all right, I'll get into this. And I was finding myself doing a little bit of marketing and, creating a catalog or creating ads and that kind of thing as well at the same time. So when I wasn't going to college, one of the business ideas that I came up with was to do Halloween hayrides in the back 40. We had the trails, we had a tractor, we had a wagon. Let's just create some little Halloween stuff in the woods and take people for a ride and charge them money. And I came up with that idea in September, and my brother came home from school. He was a senior in high school, and I said, let's do this. All right. We put some stuff in the woods, threw some ads in the newspaper because it was still sort of pre-internet. Certainly wasn't on social media. And people started showing up. And that became a 9-year stint of a seasonal attraction that got us recognition in the Wall Street Journal, and had a person donate a Ghostbuster car to us, and we gave some of the money away to the non. I wish I still had the car too. That car was awesome, and the guy father and son from Salem, Massachusetts, of all places, called us up because I did build a website pretty quickly thereafter.
I see how this all works together.
And he found us right on the line, and hey, we got this Ghostbuster card. Can you imagine today somebody doing that? Right? We just don't have anywhere to store it. You know, you want to come down and get it? Yeah, heck yeah. And you know, here's the real sad thing. When I sold that car in 2004, I'm mixing my story up a little here, but I'll tell you, I'll circle back to this. The gentleman I sold it to, he bought it for me for $2,500.
Mm.
And this car wasn't exactly an exact replica of the one in the movie, but it was a 71 Oldsmobile ambulance versus the one in the movie was a hearse, a Cadillac hearse. But you still knew what it was. You know, it was still pretty cool. It'd be worth a lot more today, especially with the popularity now of the movies that have come out since. But anyway, we did those hay rides. We did those for 9 years. The first 2 years, my parents lived there. Then they got divorced and sold the family farm to a gentleman from Connecticut, and he bought it as a second home. I ended up being a caretaker for him because I was in the area. I knew the property. I cut the grass, plowed the snow, did all that stuff for him. In exchange, he let us keep running these hay rides, which I think is crazy. Why he let a bunch of 20-year-old guys running around the woods with beer and chainsaws, I have no idea. But he was super cool to let us do that. And, I took it very seriously. But and then he ended up selling that place because he got divorced. And I bought it back from him. So this is really cool. This guy did owner financing on this house, my childhood house. He gave me a price and he said, here's what you got to put down. Never asked what I made because I was doing a little freelance web design at the time because I'd gotten started with that a few years early, but I was not making a lot of money. And I was, going straight from living at home to owning your own home with, an indoor swimming pool and 40 acres of land is not the typical pathway you go, right? You're using an apartment or a dorm or something in there.
Right.
But this guy, he financed the whole thing. I sent one check to him and one to his ex-wife. And it was super, it was an awesome opportunity. I had to get some roommates because I couldn't pay for it on my own. So I had some buddies that were getting out of college and staying in the area and working. So I said, hey, you guys want to, be a roommate here? And they knew the place because they'd help with the hay rides. And yeah, sure. Yeah. So I was, that was house hacking before the term was out there,
That's incredible.
And I was there for several years. And then that was my first, we got high-speed internet because I was doing web design on dial-up. And one of my friends had high-speed cable internet. And he says, we got to get this. I'm like, nah, dial-up's fine. I don't have a lot of money. Oh, boy, dial-up. Woo. Yeah, get rid of that. Now we got cable. We're watching the real world. We got MTV. Life is good. An indoor swimming pool, hot tub. You think that, you think that would attract a lot of interest of other people for parties, but it didn't. We still had no game. Because what wise girl is going to come out and hang out with a bunch of guys in the woods, with the pool and the hot tub? And I mean, maybe they're out there, but they weren't in New Hampshire. we didn't attract them. My sister is 7 years younger than me, and so she was getting right out of high school and like, hey, get your friends over here, right? Hang out with older guys, right? We're in our mid-20s. Nope, that didn't work either.
Wow.
Yeah, I was driving a BMW at the time because I liked the car, and it was severely used. But I thought, man, I still no game. Boy, I stink. So better keep making websites. So it's a unique journey, isn't it? Where things take us. And I was reflecting on this. When I got into website design, it was because someone said, "Hey, you ought to build websites." And that was I was 20 years old, in that window of time. Because doing Halloween hay rides was like a 1 month thing. That wasn't a living. That was a seasonal, hobby business, if you will. And I had to do something else. And so that person's one comment got me into web design, and that started this track. And I ended up selling that house 3 or 4 years later. My roommates moved on. It was just me. I was single. It was a big house. I mean, it was big, and it took a lot of upkeep, and this wasn't really a practical place for a single person. And I wish I could have gone back to myself at that, because this was in between 2001, 2004. So the real estate market was doing real well then. So I did well. I almost doubled my money in that time period, paid off the mortgage, and I, for the first time in my life, had some money in the bank. You know, it wasn't, you know, roommates had to pay the rent in order for me to pay the mortgage kind of thing. You know, finally I had a feeling of a little bit of financial stability. And I think about that point in my life because I remember being kind of nervous about taking on the risk of a mortgage, right? And being a homeowner. I was 25, which is not, you know, crazy young, but I remember thinking, geez, should I do this? Right. You know, and somebody told me it was a no-brainer, and they were right. And I think that was a little lesson learned that many of us can reflect on, is that, you know, that little leap of faith, sometimes there's a little voice saying, should I do this? Right. I mean, most of the times in life I've had that voice speaking up, things didn't end up that bad. Right. You know, they worked out usually for the better. Right. Sort of a personal growth aspect of pushing ourselves a little, you know, in business or personally. I was, as I said earlier, I was always a pretty shy person and struggled with self-confidence and probably still do a little. I feel like I've gotten better with that as I've gotten older, but I think it's still there at times. And, you know, am I smart enough? Am I, geez, well, you know, and some of that may have been that I didn't end up going to college, because that 1 year has turned into 20 plus years now. Life just kept going and I kept getting by and just following the path. But, you know, that was sort of in motion there around web design and all of this agency stuff. As the internet, there was no lack of things to learn and do, SEO and all these things. And I've got a interest in real estate as well. So I did some real estate brokerage work and some marketing, and I still do a little of that. So I kind of, you know, had a little variety in my career, and it sort of hobbled it together. I started keeping track of my income on a spreadsheet going back to like 2006. And I go back now and I look at what I was making, and I was like, yeah, man, you know, those are good times, but maybe life was cheaper then. And I'm sure it was, you know, we've got 5 kids now, and so kids cost money, and everything's cost more money than it did, you know, 15 years ago. But, you know, I look at that and like, wow, all right, you know, and some years it's done this, other years it's done that, right? You know, when you work for yourself, it's not a straight curve up. But that, yeah. So when I sold that house, I ended up buying another one here in the same town. I do wish that maybe I would have used that as a juncture in life to, you know, the internet business is all remote, right? As long as you have that internet, could have traveled some, could have just done. I stayed with a few friends for a couple months. You know, fear that analysis paralysis that happens to all of us sometimes, that was big in effect when I was selling that house, because I did not know where I was going to go. Didn't really want to move back in with my parents or my mother. So I closed on that house and didn't have a clue where I was going to sleep that night. I had money in the bank, so that was good, right? But didn't know. And I ended up crashing with some of my old roommates that had been they moved out and rented a house just 20 minutes away. So they were very nice to take me in. My early Commodore buddy, who is still good friends with now, they took me in, let me crash on their couch for a few months. And that was cheap living, but it was, 4 people living in a 2-bedroom house with 1 bath. It was tight. Yeah. And I was working from there. So I had a little den where in a corner used the computer. So I ended up deciding to buy another house, a little smaller, a little newer, easier to manage. And I was able to put some money down on that, so I didn't have as big a mortgage. And I've been fairly conservative with my investments, and probably sometimes too conservative, especially looking back on those. You know, when you're in your 20s and you may not be married, you may not have kids, you may not have a lot of these commitments or things that cost money, and you've got runway. Typically, that's the time to take some of those calculated risks. And I never had, and I still don't, some mentor, or my parents were not really business people. And so there was nobody in my corner giving advice. There was nobody giving help or handouts. I didn't have friends that were entrepreneurs. There wasn't a lot of that around here because it's kind of rural, and now there are more, but and I realize not everyone has that. I don't know, where if you had help getting where you were at. Some people certainly do, but many of us don't. And I've come to think or wonder, how that could be very helpful to people at any stage. Whether it's a coach, whether it's a family member, a friend, someone who's maybe been there, done that, and can help give you some guidance to where you want to be. That can be very much game changing, I would suspect. I remember one gentleman, the gentleman I sold the Ghostbuster car to was the fellow who bought that family farm off of me. And we remained friends for quite some time. And I would go over and have coffee with him, even though I didn't drink coffee because I'm a tea guy. And he would give me some advice. And one of the things I remember him, just basic goal planning, budgeting, right? Because I would lament about, wanting to make more money. And he says, well, what do you spend now? What is the goal? Where do you want to get to with that? And I didn't know, right? Nobody had ever introduced me to the simple act of keeping track of what you're spending. I mean, I knew I wasn't losing money. I was, but you measured it by what was in your checking account.
Mm-hmm. Right.
More money coming in, that's good, and your bills are being paid. But he never, he showed me how just to set goals, right? If you're making 60,000 a year now and your goal is to make 150, you're not starting from zero, right? You're at 60. You need another 90 to get there, and to break that down into monthly goals. That was a very elementary thing that said once you learn that, you're like, duh, why didn't I know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he may have been the closest thing to somebody at that point in my life as a mentor. He was a businessman, insurance or something, so completely unrelated to what I did, but certainly had bought and sold companies. And when I haven't talked to him in a few years, but I think he was on his fourth marriage, so he certainly had some life experience. But super cool guy. It was really nice to know him and remain friends with him through those years. But yeah, I think anybody listening, wondering, my journey is just my journey, and it's not a journey that anyone else has had. But there's certainly, we all can relate to things, I think, of how we get there, but knowing where we want to go, right? I think many people are just letting life choose, and either you decide that or life has a way of choosing that for you. And I try to instill that with my kids and even friends, right? Take the bull by the horns. And us entrepreneurs probably get that a little more, right? Because there's nobody really always pushing us, but there's also no ceiling, right? There's no limit. It's not as if we are just punching the clock, getting fixed compensation, trading time for money. I mean, we're the masters of our own ship, so to speak. And I think we accept and look at risk a little bit differently. I don't think anything that I do is super risky, but I know people that, work in super cushy jobs where you basically have to, commit a felony to be let go, where, they look at what you and I do is probably super risky, right? Because I don't know what's coming in the next month. It takes a while to make peace with that. You kind of get to the point where you can kind of know what the baseline is, but a big project could come in, or a client could leave. These things happen, and you have to make peace with that piece. I think I did a long time ago, and after having sold that property and being able to have some reserves and some savings, your cushion, however big or small that is for any of us, is my peace of mind, right? The rainy day fund that any personal finance person recommends anybody start to have. If you don't have that, it'll save you gray hairs. But I feel like you should be asking questions. You're just listening.
Well, I mean, you.
I'm rambling. It's one run.
No, you're not rambling. We're good. It's there's something to the just letting the story evolve, right? And
Okay.
just letting you go with it. So thank you for sharing all that. So to what degree are you still playing King's Quest today?
I have not played it in a while.
No, I mean like you're the king and you're on a quest, and you know what I mean? You're that character that has to go feed the goat a carrot to unlock the next stage, and then you get there and there's a new plot point. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think I do. I think, in those games there is you usually know what the mission is or the goal, right? I mean, it's save the princess or find the 3 hidden treasures or whatever that is. Usually that's made pretty clear early on. Paralleling that in life, I am probably not getting an A+ on clarity in that department. I think for me, as we spoke about last time from the acquisition standpoint, that not only is that um, something I really enjoy doing, I've certainly hit in some aspects of what I do burnout. 20+ years, the same thing. There are some pockets of burnout there, and it would sort of force me to start looking a few years ago to completely getting out of the industry and taking what I know here and going, buying a business in landscaping or, I like cars, so maybe something in the automotive space, scratching those itches. But a lot of the things that came with those is brick and mortar, a commute, fixed costs. I mean, things that take this industry, which can be pretty much virtual and geographically agnostic, off the table, right? You go buy a garage down the road, you're going to have to go to that garage unless you can completely absentee it. So I found, and I think I circled back, is that there's aspects in this industry, because it's so broad and so changing, that there's pockets and places where I will find and can find excitement and a renewed passion for, and M&A is part of that. So you don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And you've started to feel like, gosh, I'm in a rut, right? I mean, this is the lane that I've been in. I'm not, where do you go from there? And so I found small pivots and tweaks can get you back to that renewed fire. And the M&A has definitely been that for me. I'm working on 2 right now since we spoke.
Mergers and acquisitions, for those
correct.
of you that don't know what
Yep.
M&A is.
2 mergers or two acquisitions. They won't be mergers. They'll be standalone acquisitions in social media marketing. And there's some parallels between the two. They're a little separate than what I will have on currently now, which is more on the web dev SEO side. But again, things can relate there. So not completely online with these two, but I think the deals are solid. So I'm pretty excited here going into the holiday period, just trying to get the due diligence. And so for me, that's very exciting. Not only is it going to increase my cash flow, eventually, so the deals and the metrics look good, but also the work and the opportunity to do some different things and have some team members with that. I like leading, and so an opportunity to be more in that leadership role, and the challenge of growing these 2 businesses is very exciting. So that's got me, on a high now, just excited to be in this space, excited to learn, excited to meet these clients that I'm acquiring and understand their businesses. And they're all over the country too. So they're different types of businesses than what I have worked with. So that is all very renewing and exciting. And so how that ties into the King's Quest analogy, I don't know yet. I don't know that answer. I know that it's going in the right direction, and I'm enjoying it. And I think, for me, trying to build up the value of my holdings, if you will, and have a good time doing it, and continuing to learn and continuing to increase my ability to, put away more for perhaps bigger deals as I learn from these ones, sort of stepping up, right? Starting with small ones and maybe moving up a little, and just, again, going back to that, dipping your toe in the uncomfortable a little, but not betting the farm. I start to feel like you're moving forward when these things. Otherwise, you feel, sometimes I've had, especially in the last couple of years, feeling like, oh man, we're just going around in circles. We're kind of getting by. You're just staying afloat. You're not drowning, but you're not really moving. Sometimes it doesn't move fast enough for me, and I'm thinking, what do I need to do, to do that, and what levers should I pull? And that's where, the letters I send out periodically to increase my opportunities to talk to people, like the one you received, is one of those things that I know. One of these opportunities came from the letter, and it was 3 years ago. I mean, it was a long conversation where that person and I kept in touch, and they actually had started to look to transition it to some other company, but didn't get a good feel about the fit. And I reached out this fall, just checking in, and they shared that story with me. And hey, let's have that conversation. And the timing was right, the opportunity was right, and let's just let's go for it. So,
I mean, I learned, and it took me many years to understand this, that I can think anything I want and I can say anything I want. And so can you. And
mm-hmm,
so you're a king. You are acquiring more territory, right? You're doing what kings do, which is expand the territory, right? If other people are like, you know what, I don't want to be a king anymore. I got my small little kingdom, but I'm over it. You be the king. I don't want to be the king, right? That's what you do. So you're continuing on your king's quest, as far as I'm concerned.
mm-hmm,
That's the
mm-hmm.
idea, because the crown's heavy and not everyone wants it. Yeah, as we mentioned before, I've got my own little kingdom. You know what I mean? We all have our little kingdoms. Um, and so, yeah, I think the King's Quest continues on. Ladies and gentlemen, Link Moser, King Moser on the show today, youtube.com/ Send It Rising. Y'all know the drill. Join us for the live show, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Friday, if you're listening after the fact, like most people do. I love you so much. Thank you. iTunes, Spotify, and the million other places that we are. I want to make sure you know how to reach out to King Moser. King Link, where should they reach out to you?
I am on LinkedIn. Just look up linkmoser.com. I'm happy to connect with people there. And you can find my website, windhill.com. Email me at link, L-I-N-K, at windhill.com. Always happy to chat and connect with people that want to.
All right. Happy holidays, everybody. Talk to you later.